everyone, welcome back to Coding from Null. As we start to get our web application ready for deployment, there's certain things that we really need to start thinking about. Things like SEO and accessibility and performance. How does our website stack up? And a good way for us to know that is to use a tool that's built right into Chrome called Lighthouse that will measure us on a bunch of different things regarding SEO and accessibility and performance and things like that, and give us not only like a score, but also ways on how to fix that to increase our score in some of those different areas. So I'm really excited about this one. Let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so let's start looking into how we can audit our application on our performance and accessibility and all that stuff that we discussed. Now, the easiest way for us to do that is to use a tool called Lighthouse that is built directly into the Chrome browser's developer tools and allows us to quite easily test some of those things in our application. Now, this is a really good idea. I use this for any application I'm building. It's a nice tool to just quickly run and see sort of where our application is kind of stacking up and where it's just not doing so well and what things we can do to improve that. So let's go ahead and go into the client directory of our application, then just go ahead and start the development server as we've been doing up to this point. Now what I want to do is have this run and just show you sort of, we're going to get a bunch of bad scores basically, and we're going to kind of explain why that's happening and what we can do to fix that and to better test our application to make sure that the numbers and stuff that we're seeing are actually correct. So let's go ahead and open this up here. Go ahead and manage the extensions. I turned one of these off, but no, it's still on. Okay. But pretty much that some extensions, like if you have the React developer tools or anything like that running on the site, which you'll have, we were testing the site earlier with them, and you would see like a little React symbol right here that has access to the site. And you may end up getting errors for that, and you may have to turn off some of those extensions or even run in Incognito Mode to clear up some of those errors, which we will probably still see here in a second. So just hit Control-Shift-I, that brings up all the developer tools. You should see an Audits pane here. If it's not right here, it might be just in the drop-down, but again, this is built directly in here, so it should definitely be available to you. And you'll see it gives us all these options here. We can audit for mobile, desktop. It's going to score us on each one of these, which you'll see here in just a second. So these are all the actual like audits that we'll perform. And we can even simulate throttling, which we want to do. Make sure that our application can still run good on a slower network and things like that. We're just going to leave all the defaults here and go ahead and click Run Audit. It's going to take a little while to run the audit on our application, and then we're going to see it's going to give us a score on each one of those audits that are performed on performance and accessibility and SEO and best practices and all that, and we'll see just kind of how our application is stacking up at the moment, which probably won't be too good, and we'll go over exactly why that's happening and what we can do to, like I said, better test our application and even fix some of these issues. So we're seeing here that we have a very, very poor performance here. Now it's saying that there were some Chrome extensions that could have been negatively affecting this. That's definitely one of the first things you want to try to do is, like I said, if you have React developer tools or something like that. I don't have anything running right now that should be affecting this, but yet it's still fairly poor. And we're seeing first contentful paint. So the first time it paints to the screen took 5.8 seconds. That's really, really bad. And that you just see a lot of red and a lot of errors here and things that we really need to look at. And we might say, wow, like this is a lot to dig into, and how would we dig into all that? Well, one of the reasons that this is so bad right now is because we're running it in development mode. So none of our JavaScript has been minified or compacted to increase their performance or anything like that, because we're just running it in straight development mode, which is not a good idea when you're trying to test things like this. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get out of this and come in here, and we're going to show how to actually just run a production build of Create React App. So let's go ahead and just hit Control C and yes to kill the development server that we're currently running. And then what you want to do is see, I'm in the package.json file here, and we'll see, like we've just been doing start. But Create React App also comes with this nice little build command that will build us a production version of our application so we can test the actual production build, which is really nice. So go ahead and type in Npm Run Bill. And this is going to minify all the JavaScript, and it's going to, now I've ran this before, so I already have this build folder here, but you'll see it will create this build folder for you. And if you actually open this up, you'll see all of this static folder. So it statically generates all our CSS and JavaScript and stuff for us. And then you'll see all of this stuff from our public folder, like the logos and the index HTML and stuff. And that is all just creating a nice little bundled production build for us. Now this is going to grind for a little bit, like I said, and then it should give us a few commands that we then need to run to actually serve up that production build and actually run it, and then we can start running our audits on that build instead of the development mode that we have been doing up to this point. Okay, so there we go. It said that build folder is ready to be deployed. Now I only have one command here because I already have serve installed globally on my machine. You may have a couple of commands here. One that's like an npm install -g serve or something, I think. So you would, if you see that, you definitely need to run that command first to actually install the serve package. And then we can go ahead and just type in serve -s build, which will actually give us, it'll actually serve up the production build within this production folder. And so see, it gives us this other localhost 5000. Let's go ahead and run that. And nice, we'll see that our application is running exactly like you've always seen it. Difference is that it's just in the production environment rather than the development environment. So go ahead and open up your developer tools again. Again, go to the audits pane, and then we'll rerun this audit, and we'll see if our application is any better in some of those metrics that we saw that we were doing not very well at before. And we should see a fairly significant increase, especially regarding the performance metric of our application, because it's now running a more performant minified version of our application rather than the sort of bloated development version of our application. So we're still seeing that we're getting some, I think we're still getting some problems with some extensions here. So let's go ahead and probably need to run this in incognito mode. So let's take a look at how we would do that. Let's go ahead. All right, so to make sure that we don't have any of our extensions that are negatively impacting our performance here, we can just run a new incognito window, which will run us in a private browsing environment, and we'll make sure that our browser isn't trying to access any of the extensions that we might have running on our normal Chrome instance. So let's go ahead and in incognito mode, we'll go ahead and run the audit again, and we should see quite a significant increase, and then hopefully we get rid of that extensions error that is popping up. Okay, so we see our performance has jumped up quite significantly, but it's still fairly poor here. Now, the reason for this, probably for me right now, you probably won't be seeing it as low. I am kind of overloading my computer right now by recording and running all this stuff on there at the same time, which kind of is the reason my performance is lagging, I believe, because when I turned off my recording, it jumped back up to like 98%, which is really much closer to what you would see it when you're just dealing with, we're pretty much just packaging up a straight Create React app, which is fairly performant right out of the box. So you should definitely probably see yours more closer to 98 since you're not running, recording software and stuff that's sucking up your CPU usage. See here, mine's pretty high right here. So one of the things that we'll see is, so you should have again a fairly good score for performance. Our best practices scores sitting fairly good. Our SEO is at 100. That's perfect. One thing that we want to focus on is our accessibility here. So what we're going to do is go through the accessibility portion and see what we can do to increase that, and that'll kind of give you a feel for how you can use this tool for other stuff like performance or best practices and such. So like this is not using HTTP2. That's something that you could look into with your hosting environment and stuff. So here with our accessibility, see it says form elements do not have associated labels. So let's go ahead and click on that, and it tells us the failing element. And if you hover over it, super nice, it even tells you where on the page that is failing at. So, and if you want to, you can see, ensure that form controls are announced properly by assistive technologies like screen readers. So here we can see it says enter email address, but basically what it's saying is if a screen reader is running through our page, it may not read, well, it definitely won't read this if there's no label attached to it. Now we did this as more of a design sort of thing. Like I didn't really want a label up here. I just wanted to have it as a placeholder. And you'll see that sort of design pattern a lot. And what we can do is we can use things called Aria Labels, which will allow for a screen reader to still read a label for that element, but not have the label necessarily associated with the UI of our program. So, and if you click here where it says learn more, it'll actually bring up a really nice thing about how you can fix these sorts of issues. And you should see those for pretty much most of the any of the audits where it's telling you that you should probably look into something. It'll usually have a resource for you to see exactly how you can fix some of those sorts of things. Now, again, we're going to be using an Aria label or Aria attribute, which will allow us to put a label on there without necessarily impacting the UI that we've developed instead of, just putting a normal label on it. So go ahead and close that. And so that was in our subscribe component. So if we go into subscribe and come down to our form, we'll see we don't have a label for this input. So if we come in here and we just supply it with an Aria, I believe it's Aria label attribute, and we'll say enter email address. Go ahead and give that a save. And then let's go ahead and run another production build. Now let's go ahead and serve up that production build. And go ahead and open up our audit again. Go ahead and refresh this just in case. And press this little plus sign up here. It'll give us the audits panel again. We'll go ahead and rerun the audits. And just see how that Aria label has impacted our accessibility score. So now we're seeing our accessibility is at a nice 100, and that's exactly what we want to see. And what's really nice about this is it'll even pick up on some things, like it picked up on that a label was missing. It'll also pick up on contrast issues. So if you have colors that like text, and then the background, there's not enough contrast between those, meaning that possibly somebody that is colorblind may not be able to read the text on your site, things like that. It'll come up with that. And it's just a very nice, quick tool to make sure that your application is accessible to everyone. Again, your performance should definitely be sitting quite a bit better than what mine's at, since I'm recording right now as well. But now we should see that we're sitting pretty well green scores all the way across the board, which is what we want to see. And again, if you're needing to still dig into something like the accessibility or see this best practices, we can click on this. There's typically always a learn more resource there, so you can look into more of how you would actually fix that issue and bump your scores up. So that's kind of the basics of Lighthouse. And again, I would strongly suggest running this on any application that you're working on. It's a really good tool to give you an idea of just how your application is performing in those key areas. What's also nice is it also has this PWA built right in. You see we're not doing very well on this at all because we're really not developing this app as a PWA. But if you're wanting to build a progressive web app and get it on like the Google Play Store, this is a really nice tool that you can use to audit that app to make sure that it's going to pass and be able to be available on the Google Play Store and stuff like that. So definitely just a very good tool to use to audit your application to make sure it's hitting the metrics and stuff that you want it to be hitting. And that's kind of just a brief overview of it. Again, I would use this on all your applications. I certainly use it on all of mine. And just another thing that just makes sure that you're always running on a production version of your site. It's also really good. So we're testing this as a production build locally, but it's also good that once you deploy it, so you're actually hosting it on something like a Netlify or Heroku or something like that, that you actually run the audit on the website itself and that will give you a real good feel of like how it's actually performing for your users and stuff. So that's pretty much it for this week, and a nice little introduction to Lighthouse. Hope you learned a lot, and a nice tool for you to use as you build and test your own applications. And I will see you all again next week.